It's hard to know whether a word can ever be rehabilitated or whether the attempt should even be made. Words are weapons and can be used like any tools for good or evil. We're all aware of the cliched uses of terms like terrorists versus freedom fighters. An atheist can be called an unbeliever. A theist can be called superstitious. A man of conviction can be called an extremist, and a man of moderation, cowardly. A free spirit can be called a libertine or a hedonist. A cautious introvert can be labeled a stodgy prude. Words are weapons of judgment, primarily moral judgment. We can say that a man can be freed of sins if he accepts Jesus, and we can also say that he can be freed of irrationality if he does not. A patriot will say that a soldier serves his country. Others may take him to task for his blind obedience. Acts considered murderous in peacetime are hailed as noble in war. And we can go on with this. Some words can never be rehabilitated, and neither should they be. Nazi, evil, incest, abuse, rape, murder. These are all words that describe the blackest impulses of the human soul and can never be turned to a good end. Edmund may say in King Lear, "Evil be thou my good," but we know that he's not speaking paradoxically. He's merely saying that which others call evil, that is my self-interest, is good for me. The word anarchy may be almost beyond redemption. Any attempt to find goodness in it could well be utterly futile, or worse. The philosophical equivalent of the cliched scene in hospital dramas where the surgeon blindly refuses to give up on a clearly dead patient. Maybe I'm engaged in just such a fool's quest in this little video. Perhaps the word anarchy has been so abused throughout its long history, so thrown into the pit of incontestable human iniquity, that it can never be untangled from the evils that supposedly surround it. Let me ask you, what images spring to your mind when you hear the word anarchy? Surely it evokes mad riots of violence and lawlessness, a post-apocalyptic Darwinian free-for-all where the strong and evil dominate the meek and reasonable. Or maybe you view it as a mad political agenda, a thin ideological cover for murderous desires and cravings for assassinations, where wild-eyed, mustachioed men with thick hair and thicker accents roll cartoon bombs under the ornate carriages of slowly waving monarchs. Or maybe you view anarchy as more of a philosophical specter, the haunted and angry mutterings of overcaffeinated and seemingly eternal grad students, a nihilistic surrender to all that is seductive and evil in human nature, a hurling off the cliff of self-restraint, and a savage plunge into the mad magic of the moment without rules, without plans, without a future. If your teenage son were to come home to you on a sunny afternoon and tell you that he had become an anarchist, you would likely feel a strong urge to check his bag for black hair dye, fresh nose rings, clumpy mascara, and dirty needles. His announcement would very likely cause a certain trapdoor to open under your heart where you may fear that it might fall forever. The heavy syllables of words like intervention, medication, boot camp, and intensive therapy would probably accompany the thudding of your quickened pulse. And all this may be true. I may be thumping the chest of a broken patient long since destined for the morgue. But certain insights, you could say, or maybe correlations, continue to trouble me immensely, and I cannot shake the fear that it is not anarchy that lies on the table clinging to life, but rather the truth. Let me take a minute to communicate what troubles me so much about the possible injustice of throwing the word anarchy into the pit of evil. And if I haven't convinced you by the end of this video that something very unjust may be afoot, then I'll have to continue my task of resurrection with others, because I don't think for a moment that I would ever convince you to call something good that is, in fact, evil. And neither would I want to. Now, the actual definition we're told of anarchy is, number one, absence of government, a state of lawlessness due to the absence or inefficiency of the supreme power or political disorder. And number two, a theoretical social state in which there is no governing person or body of persons, but each individual has absolute liberty without implication of disorder. So we can see that the word anarchy represents two central meanings: an absence of both government and social order, and number two, an absence of government with no implication of social disorder. So let's focus on without government. What does that mean in practice? Well, clearly there are two kinds of leaders in this world: those who lead by incentive and those who lead by force. Those who lead by incentive will offer you a salary to come and work for them. Those who lead by force will throw you into jail if you don't pick up a gun and fight for them. Those who lead by incentive will try to get you to voluntarily send your children to their schools by keeping their prices reasonable, their classes stimulating, and demonstrating proven and objective success. Those who lead by force will simply tell you that if you don't pay the property taxes to fund their schools, you'll be thrown into jail. Clearly, this is the difference between voluntarism and violence. The word anarchy does not mean no rules. It does not mean kill others for fun. It does not mean no organization. It simply means without a political leader. The difference, of course, between politics and every other area of life is that in politics, if you don't obey the government, you're thrown into jail. If you try to defend yourself against the people who come to throw you in jail, they'll shoot you. So what does the word anarchy really mean? It simply means a way of interacting with others without threatening them with violence if they don't obey. It simply means without political violence, or without rulers, or simply no rulers. The difference between this word and words like murder and rape is that we do not mix murder and rape with the exact opposite actions in our lives and consider the results normal, moral, and healthy. We don't strangle a man in the morning and then help a woman across the street in the afternoon and call ourselves good. The true evils that we all accept, rape, assault, murder, and theft, are never considered a core and necessary part of the life of a good person. An accused murderer does not get to walk free by pointing out that he spent all but 5 seconds of his life not killing someone. With those acknowledged evils, one single transgression changes the moral character of an entire life. You would never be able to think of a friend who is convicted of rape in the same way ever again. That's just life. However, this is not the case with anarchy. It does not fit that category of evil at all. When we think of a society without political violence, that is, without governments, these specters of chaos and brutality always arise for us immediately, and it would seem irrevocably. But it only takes a moment of thought to realize that we live the vast majority of our actual lives in complete and total anarchy, and call such anarchy morally good. For example, take dating, marriage, and family. In any reasonably free society, these activities do not fall in the realm of political coercion. No government agency chooses who you're to marry and have children with and punishes you with jail for disobeying their rulings. Voluntarism, incentive, mutual advantage, and dare we say advertising all run the free market of love, sex, and marriage. What about your career? Did a government official call you up at the end of high school and inform you that you were to become a doctor, a lawyer, a factory worker, a waiter, an actor, a programmer, or a philosopher? Of course not. You were left free to choose the career that best matches your interests, abilities, and initiative. What about your major financial decisions? Each month, does a government agent come to your house and tell you exactly how much you should save, how much you should spend, whether you can afford that new couch or that old painting? Did you have to apply to the government to buy a new car, a new house, a flat screen TV, or a toothbrush? No, in all these areas, love, marriage, family, career, finances, we all make our major decisions in the complete absence of direct political coercion. So if anarchy is such an all-consuming universal evil, why is it the default and virtuous freedom that we demand in order to achieve just liberty in our daily lives? If the government told you tomorrow that it was going to choose for you where to live, how to earn your keep, and who to marry, would you fall to your knees and thank the heavens that you've been saved from such terrible anarchy? The anarchy of making your own decisions in the absence of direct political coercion? Of course not. The exact opposite would happen. You would be horrified and would oppose such an encroaching dictatorship with all your might. This is what I mean when I say that we consider anarchy to be an irreducible evil and also an irreducible good. It's both feared and despised while it's considered necessary and virtuous. If you were told that tomorrow you would wake up and there would be no government, you would doubtless fear the specter of anarchy. If you were told tomorrow that you would have to apply for a government permit to have children, you would doubtless fear the specter of dictatorship and long for the days of anarchy when you could decide such things without the intervention of political coercion. So we can see that we human beings are deeply, almost ferociously ambivalent about anarchy. We desperately desire it in our personal lives and just as desperately fear it politically. Another way of putting this is that we love the anarchy we live and yet fear the anarchy we imagine. One more point, and then you can decide whether my patient on the table is beyond hope or not. It has been pointed out that a totalitarian dictatorship is characterized by the almost complete absence of rules. When Solzhenitsyn was arrested, he had no idea what he was really being charged with, and when he was given his 10-year sentence, there was no court of appeal or any legal proceedings whatsoever. He had displeased someone in power, and so it was off to the gulags with him. When we examine countries where government power is at its greatest, we see situations of extreme instability and a marked absence of objective rules or standards. The tin-pot dictatorships of third world countries are regions arbitrarily and violently ruled by gangs of sociopathic thugs. Closer to home for most of us is the example of inner-city government-run schools ringed by metal detectors and saturated with brutality, violence, sexual harassment, and bullying. The surrounding neighborhoods are also under the tight control of the state, which runs welfare programs, public housing, the roads, police, buses, hospitals, sewers, the water, the electricity, and just about everything else in sight. These sorts of neighborhoods have moved beyond democratic socialism and actually lie closer to dictatorial communism. In the same way, when we think of these inner cities as a whole, we can also understand that the majority of the endemic violence results from the drug trade, which directly resulted from government bans on the manufacture and sale of certain kind of drugs. Treating drug addiction rather than arresting addicts would, as it's estimated, reduce criminal activity by up to 80%. So here again, where there's a concentration of political power, we see violence, mayhem, shootings, stabbings, rapes, and all the attendant despairs and nihilism. Everything that anarchism is accused of. What about prisons, where political power is surely at its greatest? Prisons seethe with rapes, murders, stabbings, and assaults, not to mention drug addictions. Sadistic guards beat on sadistic prisoners to the point where the only difference at times seems to be the costumes. So here in prison, we have a society that seems like a parody of anarchy, a nihilistic and ugly universe usually described by the word anarchy, which actually results from a maximization of political power, or the exact opposite of anarchy. People would argue that it may be true that an excess of political power breeds anarchy, but that a deficiency of political power also breeds anarchy. Maybe order is a sort of Aristotelian mean, which lies somewhere between the chaos of complete absence of political coercion and the chaos of an excess of political coercion. However, we utterly reject that approach in other areas in our lives: love, marriage, finances, career. We understand that any intrusion of political coercion into these realms would be a complete disaster for our freedoms. We do not say with regard to marriage, well, we wouldn't want the government choosing everyone's spouses, but neither do we want the government having no involvement in choosing people's spouses. The correct amount of government coercion in marriage lies somewhere in the middle. No way! We specifically and unequivocally reject the intrusion of political coercion into such personal aspects of our lives. So once more, we must at least recognize the basic paradox that we desperately need and desire the reality of anarchy in our personal lives, and yet desperately hate and fear the idea of anarchy in our political environment. We love the anarchy we live. We fear the anarchy we imagine, the anarchy we're taught to fear. Unless we can discuss the realities of our ambivalence toward this kind of voluntarism, we will remain fundamentally stuck as a species. Like any individual who wallpapers over his ambivalence, we will spend our lives in distracted and oscillating avoidance to the detriment of our own present and our children's future. That's why I can't just let this patient called anarchy die. There's still a heartbeat, and it's very, very strong. If you guys want me to continue with this dissertation on anarchy, let me know in the comments section below. If you enjoy these videos, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification icon, give it a thumbs up, share it with everybody you know, and don't forget to subscribe to my private email list through my website, highimpactflix.com, and subscribe to me on BitChute and Odyssey. I'll see you guys in the next video.